All right. Good afternoon. My name is Mykai Eastman, and here I have my friends Jedonn Bell and Melany Uhrhammer. We're here to discuss different views on how race plays a huge part in theater in terms of how we are cast and how we're typed as individuals and artists. I have Jedonn, who specializes as an actor, who's gone through various productions of mine that I've actually directed him in, and I want to talk to him specifically about how he was able to translate what we learned going to school together into how he intends to take that career professionally as he moves on, and even some of his experiences. And we have Melany, who has been a costume designer for me multiple times, but specifically going to school to study acting, and how she, as a white passing Latinx woman, has different opinions as to whether or not how she was able to see herself as represented through different artists and different lens of directors or writers and so on and so forth. But first of all, I want to thank you too for taking the time to speak with me about this, especially on such short notice, but I really appreciate it. I want to start off with saying,
Yeah, man.
yeah, of course. um, I just want to start off with say, as a director and writer, my mission has been to transcend type, as at least in terms of how you look, because obviously there's going to be certain things of I can't know what an experience of a 60-year-old grandfather is. I can only do my best from what I've spoken to my grandfather or see how other people interact with others. But there are certain things that don't have to be preconceived, and an example would be if I'm thinking of the ingenue or the juvenile, it doesn't always have to be necessarily the pale skin, blonde hair, blue eyed tenor, or or alto, even. There's this thing that we've kind of trapped ourselves in through hundreds of years of this is how we're able to understand theater, and it's going to make it easier for us as an audience to say, well, this is what A, B, and C looks like. And if they look like this, it'll help me understand their characterization of the plot. And that's how it's been since the Greeks, and even especially in the Renaissance with the invention of the commedia dell'arte archetypes and things like that. I think that we as humans have at least the capacity to step past that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that with your personal experiences and what you might think of things like that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think
I mean,
who wants to go first?
you can go ahead.
Okay. Um, I think like as someone who I've recently learned that casting directors tend to cast me as ingenues or like the romantic love interest, and it just kind of makes me wonder if I weren't so, because I'm Dominican, I'm half Dominican and I'm half German, so I have those two sides of me, and I feel like often the European side comes out a lot during auditions and things like that, and it makes me wonder if I didn't have this like specific look, if I were like if casting directors would even like consider me like for the ingenue part. And another thing is this year I've noticed, I recently started straightening my hair a lot this year. When years before, when I'd straighten my hair, I looked a lot more Latina, a lot more Latinx, and I wouldn't get called back for ingenue roles. And I've noticed that this year specifically that I've been styling my hair in a more like, I guess, Eurocentric way. I've been looked at for more love interest parts, which has been pretty interesting. Looking at that, yeah, those are my thoughts for now on that.
Appreciate it.
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it stems from being like, I think a lot of it snowballed in a way. You know what I mean? It's like we've taken, we've been for so long writing all of these parts for specific people and specific people and specific people that now it might be that like the people who do this a lot don't really know how to write other characters outside of their own like little bubble, so they don't really know how to like put everybody and they may kind of see it as sort of an authenticity is a sacrifice for like diversity in a way, you know, like maybe let's not be so diverse and let's write the character that I know and let's write the character that like everybody else knows. But I think Mykai had a really good point when he brought up kids, because like a kid is a kid. Like, you know, I don't think a kid has to look a certain way because a kid's just a kid. Like a kid can just be anything. A kid's kind of that perfect blank canvas that you can mold into whatever you want. So I think that's kind of a very interesting thing to think about, because it's like, you know, why are kids always looking like this? Or why do kids always kind of step like this? Maybe that can be the branch that people can kind of branch out from and start kind of playing around with. And maybe that'll help them in the future to write other characters that'll be more diverse for people like passes and other. I kind of got one speed as far as people are concerned. So, you know, it's kind of like that.
I kind of, so I wrote a paper once on color conscious casting versus colorblind casting in the acting community. And I talked a lot about how directors are scared of like the diversity tokenism and like all of that. So they tend to not like include characters written specifically for people of color because they don't want to have like that token character, and like, and then they would rather just colorblind cast everybody and like kind of just have like, you know, the mixed ambiguous looking girl, and then like maybe one black guy that's also gay, because why not? Like, let's just fit all of the like diversity quotas in there at once. And I just think it's more of a matter of hiring the right people. I think it's more of a matter of like making sure that there are people of color on your creative and artistic staff, so you know, like if you're writing something like how you were saying, if you're writing a kid, like, yeah, a kid is something you can mold so much, but there's such a big difference between how a Hispanic kid grows up versus how a Black kid grows up versus how a white kid grows up. So I think it's just purely like on the job of like the playwright, the director, the artistic staff to just like do some research and have people that they can go to kind of like fact check and just like make sure that they're not doing anything that isn't appropriate for the show that they're doing. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I'm thinking about it in terms of I write shows and I direct shows. The shows that I write tend to have a focus towards people of color. And that's simply because of the message that I'm trying to push forward, as in these experiences are not necessarily exclusive to people of color, but it lends itself that what I've gone through is more relatable and makes more sense with the people that I've grown up around and what I've surrounded myself with, at least in terms of my family, because I come from, you know, a very mixed bag in my family. You know, I got Mexicans, I got Guyanese Indians, I've got Black people, all just kind of meshed up in there, and that creates a very specific type of culture that I've had to grow up with. And even when I went to school, I've always gone to predominantly white schools or predominantly white institutions, like both my colleges that I've attended. And I think it's interesting, especially once I started doing theater, how it's perceived that, okay, we look at Fences by August Wilson. I'm going to use the two extremes I could think about. Fences, and we look at, for example, All My Sons and Arthur Miller. When I was in high school, we did 2 casts of Arthur Miller's All My Sons, and there was a lot that went into it. But I'm looking at it how it was for what it was. John knows what I'm talking about because he was there. But just taking out the production problems out of it, All My Sons was able to easily translate to us being Black people because there was nothing specific that had to be mentioned of. You know, there wasn't like, oh yeah, we're going to our annual clan meeting, or oh, we're going to our sharecropping hoedown. No, there wasn't anything like that. Like it's pretty ambiguous in terms of who the killers had to be. Like, yes, historically you can look at it as in, well, what is most likely going to come out of owning an airplane business in the 40s. Like, yeah, it would definitely 9 out of 10 times be a white person. But yeah, but looking at that versus taking Once on This Island, for example, and how they love to have productions of colorblind Once on This Island for whatever reason. Or even when I was in Ithaca, New York, and they did essentially an all-white production of Hairspray, and because they didn't have the people of color to cast it, they decided that, well, we still want to do this show, but we're going to change the narrative. It's, instead of it being a race thing, we're going to make it a body thing. So they're going to focus on the plot of, yes, Tracy is heavier set than everybody else. Like, how do we highlight that versus, the white and black thing? So I wanted to get your thoughts on that when they tried to impose colorblind casting in order to suit the need of, oh, well, we don't have the cast to do this. So how do we fix this?
I have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know if I'm going to get them in order, but so with the Hairspray thing, that's missing the point.
Right.
Like, I think it's so important, like, when you go in to do a show, obviously I haven't directed anything major, but I know if I were to, I would research the historical meaning behind the show that I'm doing, especially if it's a time period piece like Hairspray, which takes place at a very important time in America, like the 1960s, where segregation and all of that was happening. So if you choose to do a show like Hairspray and make it about body acceptance, which is, the show is already about body acceptance, but that it also has the main point, which is what is like racism and what is like all of those things that were going on in the 60s and like segregation. And I think if you don't have the people, don't do the show. Like simple as that. If you don't have the right amount of people to do the show that you want to do, don't do it. But then there's also the whole like idea of like, well, then how do you educate people on a topic? Like, so if there's no Black people like in a city, like these other white people are never going to see fences, but then like the white people still shouldn't do fences. But it's like, there's also the whole idea of like, okay, so if you don't have the diversity, you just don't do the show, and then no one ever gets exposed to the show, which is pretty like controversial. I think if it's done in an educational setting, maybe that could work, but I don't think professional theater should ever touch something if they don't have the people for it. Like if they have auditions and people of color don't show up, or like enough people of color don't show up, I think the show should be canceled or switched for another one.
Yeah.
Hey man, I 100% agree. I'm in 1000% agreement of what you just said right there, because like, I don't think Hairspray, because like you said, Hairspray is not just about body acceptance. I think Hairspray is just about acceptance. Like, it's everybody. There are gay people in Hairspray, there are colored people in Hairspray, and then there's heavyset people in Hairspray. And it's about everybody kind of coming together and being like, united, and hey, we can all do this too. So I think by removing certain aspects of that show, you're then taking away from the general message and hurting the show, like, as a whole. And when it comes to other shows like Once on This Island or like Fences, where like if you don't have the cast for it, then you shouldn't do the show, because there are just certain things that certain cultures as a whole can't really relate to that these shows will cover. Like Once on This Island takes heavily from like, Caribbean music and stuff. And I, being a West Indian man, know a little bit about Caribbean music, and if I'm seeing a bunch of people who have never heard a calypso song in their life trying to sing calypso, it's like, well, no, that's not really how it's gonna work out. No, this is awful. Or another example is my sophomore year in high school. I went to high school with Mykai, and the school did In the Heights. And one of the guys who was playing Usnavi, you could clearly tell, had never listened to a hip hop song in his life, ever. And me being the sophomore, I'm wanting to go, hey, here's how rap music works. You're doing it incorrectly. Here's kind of how it goes, but I can't because then it's going to be like, oh, little underclassman, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. But it was just one of those things where it's like one cast was clearly doing better than the other because they had come up in that background. They had come up with that type of music. They understood what was happening. While the other guy was just kind of not, and he didn't understand it. And it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. He shouldn't have been there. But, you know, it is what it is. Schools do it, and it hurts the shows in the process. So I 100% agree. Don't do the show if you don't have to cast.
And I think it's very interesting that you brought that up because we had 2 casts for that show. We as a lot of high schools do, they double cast these things. Everybody gets like not everybody, but more often than not, it was one cast performs Thursday, Saturday, one cast performs Friday and Sunday. And I'm gonna use that In the Heights production as an example because our high school, we had very much a diverse student body. Like even in our theater, especially in our theater department at that time, it was honestly, I think the majority was probably Latinx people. And you look at it in the Hyatt situation where the casting was dubious, to say the least, because Nina was played by a Greek woman in one cast, and the other cast, she was Puerto Rican. Daniela was played by 2 white women for some reason. And I'm trying to think. There was also, I forgot what Nina's mother was. I called her Mrs. Rosario. One night, white, another night, Latina. And that begs the question of, why are we in this position? Because that's a case of, it's not like we didn't have the cast. We clearly had a cast, and there were plenty of people who weren't cast in the show at all, who could have done it just as well. So I'm interested to think of what you have in thoughts of what are the directors trying to say when it comes to things like that, because I can guarantee you that's not the only possible instance that's occurred in all of, at least, educational history.
I don't think they're trying to say anything. And I think that's the problem. I think you shouldn't do shows that are that have very specific messages when you yourself as a director aren't trying to say anything. Because if you're going to do a show like In the Heights, which is celebrating the Latinx community, that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't do a show about celebrating the Latinx community and then cast white people in it. There's nothing wrong with white people. They just should be in another show. Like, not In the Heights. Like, not, that's it. Like, I'll take a white guy playing Benny. I'll take a white guy playing Benny, but that's about it. Like, and In the Heights.
Trust me, we did that too.
Everything else.
Yeah, that was also a thing.
Because that's the only person who is not race specific in the Heights. They just say that they aren't Hispanic. That's the only thing. But obviously, if I were to cast a Benny, I would look for someone a little bit more not white. I don't know why. It's just because unless they just could sing the song well, that's the only thing, the only reason why the only character I would cast as not Hispanic, or at least have some sort of like Hispanic in them. Because I know some characters in the Heights are like in the original cast are supposed to be like Afro-Latina, things like that. So that's fine with me. It's just like, I think that when you do a show with the wrong people, you're not trying to send a message, or you're not really thinking about what this show means. You just want to do it because it's fun, or like you think people will come to the show. But like, like you wouldn't do ragtime. Like, okay, so you wouldn't do ragtime with like, do you guys know ragtime?
Of course.
With like, there's obviously 3 different races in ragtime. You wouldn't do ragtime if you didn't have the people for it. So I don't understand why that wouldn't apply to other shows overall. Like, I don't, yeah, it's frustrating.
Right, or like Miss Saigon. You wouldn't do Miss Saigon without Asian people. Like,
you would think
the show doesn't mechanically work without it, but people do it. Like the show should not mechanically be able to operate without these people of this culture in order to represent their cultures. But people try it anyway because I guess they're friends with these guys, or like, let's say they're in a school and they're like, oh, well, these are the seniors, so let's put the seniors in everything. And instead of trying to put on the best possible show we can, let's just throw all the seniors at that wall and hope that they all stick. Or like, you know, like I said before, people are friends and they're just like, oh, I'm going to put my friend in the show. I'm going to put my friend in the show. They're not looking for the people who would best be fit for that show.
Yeah, and kind of transitioning from that, it's interesting you say that because especially nowadays, this happens more often than not in educational institutions rather than the professional world, because in 2020, you know, cancel culture, that's not going to fly. Right. More often than not, somebody's going to find out about it. They're going to send out a tweet, and then that company's reputation is ruined as a whole, especially if they don't shut it down. But if they do shut it down, then people are going to be more hesitant. So when we're looking at high schools, middle schools, universities, and things like that, is there something to correlate of, well, we're trying to do, I guess that transitions into why are we doing these shows? What are we doing this musical, this play for at this very second with our group of students? People at least tend to look at it differently the younger the actors and like the educational institution is, because, for example, if you look at middle school, you're like, oh, well, you know, they can do
The Wiz.
They can do the yeah, exactly. They can do the Wiz with Sally, Tim, Phil, everybody else. Like, nobody cares. And you know, if you do the Wiz at the Stress Center with, you know, an all-white cast, obviously somebody's gonna be raising eyebrows. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's
my high school's actually the Wiz next year. I just saw, which I think is interesting. But there are enough people of color at that school to do the Wiz, so I'm fine with it. But when it comes to like we were talking about Once on This Island, there's like a local theater, like professional equity house, like in my hometown, and they're planning on doing Once on This Island as their like educational show. And me and my friends who have auditioned for them before have had some thoughts about that, because the general audition pool that auditions there are predominantly white. Like if any of us, like anytime any of us had gone to a callback there, we were usually the only people of color there. And I'm like, I don't know, it's just really concerning when I think about it. And like, I was talking to my friend Ty about it, and he was telling me that he was telling me like, oh, like he's probably going to talk to the artistic director and like ask him why they chose to do that show, because he has a really close relationship with them. Okay. So I don't know. I think it's I think it just all falls under the line of like intention, I guess. But even if your intentions are good, I just think there are other shows. There's so many other shows.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
It's just one of those things where it's like I have a friend who is got cast in Once on This Island, and unfortunately her show's been postponed. The current world falling apart. But like she was even telling me, she was like, I was honestly like shocked at how many Caribbean people are in this show. Like it was a happy thing. She was like, you know, we're finally getting cast in a show that was meant for us. You know what I'm saying? Like it's baffling to me that for so long and so often, people aren't cast properly in these shows. They're just like, I think they may be looking at like, oh, who hits the notes best? Oh, who can technically do this show better if like a critic is listening and not watching. But a lot more goes into emulating a culture than like being able to sing really well. You know, there's a certain rhythm that you have, there's a certain type of feel that it has, there are certain movements that you do, and a lot of people don't understand that. That's why a lot of these shows end up falling flat, and people just don't know why. And I'm sitting back here like I know exactly why, but nobody wants to listen to me, you know, or you or anybody else, because they're so stuck in this way of just, oh no, we're gonna cast you, we're gonna cast you, and we're gonna cast you, and it's like, well, the show isn't culturally for them, but you're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like American theater is not as like respected as it should be. Like, because when I think about it, you wouldn't do like a no show or like a kabuki show or like
Nope.
like what are the Indian shows called? The ones with like the you know what I you know what
Yeah, it has been a while, but I do know what you mean.
I wish I knew the name because I don't want to sound like well, yeah, like no one would dare to touch those things, like because they're like sacred parts of culture. So it's like when you take like a piece of theater that's so like it's like drenched in culture, people are just like, whatever, like it doesn't matter, like we'll get it, they'll get the point. And I think that that's so wrong. And I just think that there needs to be more respect placed on like theater in general. And like I think actors need to have some sort of respect for themselves as well and whatever message they're trying to send. And if they don't have a message, they need to like figure that out. Like, and it can change with every show, but I think that that's the main issue is when you're casting people, you need to have like a clear message about what you want to send. And if it's, I'm going to do this show that's really supposed to be about African American people, and now I decided to cast it predominantly white. What does that say?
Yeah,
like, exactly. So I think it'd be a lot. I think it'd be a lot better if it were less so of just, oh, this show's going to be fun, we don't have to cast for it, but it's going to be fun, or more, and they more so went with here's what I have, let's look at the shows that I can do for these people. You know, I feel like that's a simple solution, especially for schools, because you know who your seniors are going to be, you know who your juniors are going to be, you know all of that information. So you can look at who you've got, and you can look at the shows that match up with those people, and then you'd be able to put on much better shows because of it.
Yeah, like a perfect example of that, the year after I graduated high school, there were like, I think there were 5 rising seniors who were all super vocally talented, and they were all Black, and they did the show Ain't Misbehavin', and that was so beautiful. Like, and I went to go see it because I had some friends in it, and then they took it to States, and it was so successful that they started like touring the show, like to make money from it. So like the director I had like they saw like the rising seniors they had, and they were like, I know that we will not be able to do a show for them, like a big main stage musical for them, where they can all be involved. But if I do a show that requires 5 African American actors, 5 Black actors, and they're all like, I have them, and they're all like able to do it, like I'm gonna give them that opportunity. And yeah, like those like, and I think they also did Hairspray that year, which is funny now that I think about it. But like, I just think that's really cool. Like looking at the people that you have and being like, okay, like what can I do for these people? I think that was a really good point you made.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely agree.
I just thought of another example.
1 second, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no worries.
But we're running close to our 7-minute mark here before we have to end the meeting. We have a very specific amount of time. But I just want to leave one quick question as to what you all might think of this. But how do we fix it? Because we're looking at theater as this very tight-knit business. It's very hard to break into, especially different communities. You know, it's all about who you know, not so much about what you know. So how do you think that we are able to in the future as artists of color be able to break this mold as to how casting should be accomplished and how we're able to also get our voice heard in the midst of that.
Easy. Let's make our own stuff. You know, Jordan Peele said, "Oh, there aren't a lot of roles for us. I'm going to make them." Lin-Manuel Miranda said, "Hey, there's not a lot of roles for us, so I'm going to make them." I think that at this point, people have become so set in their ways that really the only way for us to be able to get out of there and get out there and get ourselves heard and all of that is just make our own stuff. You know, let's just write our own shows. Let's put on our own shows for us, you know, with the shows that we culturally know how to put on. Because then people can't complain about it because it's like, oh, wow, that was really good. I wonder why. I wonder if the casting had something to do with it. You look at Black Panther as an example, and how everybody got upset because Black Panther this, Black Panther that. People are putting such a big deal on Black Panther. But people didn't realize that we were just seeing that we could do it too. Like, I come from a background where a lot of people didn't do theater, and theater was supposed to be this white people thing. And it was just for white people. And oh, why are you doing theater? Why are you acting? You shouldn't be acting. You should want to be a basketball player or a football player or a rapper, because nobody saw Black people actually doing theater. Sure, there was your Will Smith. Sure, Sidney Poitier, although people my age don't really know who he is. But like, as far as the whole was considered, people only saw a bunch of white people doing, you know, Newsies and Rent and all of that. They didn't see us, so nobody thought it possible. Black Panther and Get Out and Us and In the Heights showed people that it's possible. So I think we need to take that ball and roll with it.
I appreciate it. Mel, what do you think?
I agree to you. Well, I agree with you to some degree, because I do think that it's really important that we go out and make our own things. Because now that I think about it, I think the main reason why I do get cast as a white female a lot of the time is because there aren't roles for young Hispanic girls in shows. But I also don't think it's up to me to make those roles for myself. I think that there are people who have a lot of power in the industry who can take people of color under their wing and give them a platform so that they like young script writers, young directors, like all of that. Like, I don't think it's necessarily up to us, because we're at the bottom of like the theater like privilege scale. So like, I just think that it's not all up to us. Like, yes, we should be creating our own things. Yes, we should be doing all these things. But I think that people with power in theater should be giving platforms to these younger creators, or not even younger, but, you know, like people of color, and they should be working with them. And they should be hiring creative staff that are people of color. And I just think that that's how you fix it, because at the end of the day, like, we're all gonna root for our people, like, you know. So if we're on the creative staff, if we're on, like, if we're writing these plays, if we're directing these plays, like, we're gonna make sure they're being done right and with like the proper intention. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
All right. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. I think this is a very fruitful discussion, and honestly, there are a lot of points that were raised that I think would be very useful. But once again, I want to thank you for your time, and I think we've enlightened ourselves a little bit. All right.
Yeah. Yep. Anytime.